I mean, I was told by my film professor, there are films and there are movies, and sometimes you've got to know what you're walking into.
Yeah. See, but I come from a time when movies were films.
Happy Star Wars Day to anyone who actually celebrates this very weird holiday. This is the day where we celebrate this very mismanaged and very confusing and frustrating franchise that we all love, even though it's caused us a lot of emotional pain and also physical pain. Pain that I'll never really recover from because of just how mismanaged and also just how emotionally shattering some of these films are. In honor of Star Wars Day, I'm going to be going through all of the Star Wars movies ranked from worst to best. We're not going to be including shows here. I haven't seen all the shows. I haven't seen Ahsoka. I haven't seen Andor. I bet they're good, but, maybe next year I'll do the shows as well. If I had to say what's my favorite show, it may be Clone Wars, and on a different day, it may be The Mandalorian Season 2. Mandalorian Season 2, one of my favorite seasons in TV ever, and also Clone Wars final season is a truly just absolute masterpiece. So, regardless of that, shows not included here, but the movies are going to be included here. And let's just go ahead and start diving into it. All right, starting us off here with our number 12 spot, the worst Star Wars movie is not Rise of Skywalker, even though you could say it is. For my worst Star Wars movie, I think that is Star Wars The Clone Wars, the animated movie. This movie, I watched it earlier this year and a few years ago. This movie has no chance of being good. It never gets good on any watch that I go through. This film is very frustrating because on one hand, it is a Clone Wars movie, and Clone Wars is fire, but this is like season 1 through 3 Clone Wars, which had really a hard time of getting a good going here with that show. Later on in the show, it gets good, but early seasons Clone Wars, not good. This movie acts as almost like a pilot to the show, which is really cool, but also really bad, clearly mismanaged. They clearly have an idea of what they're trying to do, but they're just not quite there yet. And like I said, final seasons of Clone Wars, absolute masterpiece. This one, not so. It has its moments. It is really fun to go through, but at the same time, it's a drag and it's really a painful experience to go through. But I still love it a little bit. Keeping us going here with the second worst Star Wars movie I have at our number 11 spot, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. You knew this was coming. You knew it would be some here in this list near the bottom, and it's right here as the second worst film in the franchise. Star Wars Rise of Skywalker is a very frustrating movie. I saw this in theaters, actually, and I was really happy. I was smiling from ear to ear, but it's still just not good. For the fans and all the fan service, I absolutely love it. Palpatine's really cool. But this movie has a very dumb decision of deciding to go back with what The Last Jedi did and completely butcher that and just try to rehash this entire trilogy and give a final climactic ending. And it makes it frustrating because when you have all these creative differences and all these pivots with the story, nothing feels earned, nothing is really focused on and really built up along the way. I absolutely love Force Awakens. It's near the top of this list, and I think this whole trilogy had a lot of potential to be really good, but they just didn't have a clear set path for this trilogy. I don't even think that it's exactly J.J. Abrams' fault or even Rian Johnson, but just the Disney executives. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy gets a lot of hate for this entire Star Wars fiasco, but I think that what happened here is them just completely butchering what Rian Johnson did and going into this new movie with a completely different idea and absolutely letting go of everything else in the past. And on one hand, if you're a Rian Johnson fan, you think that's terrible. And if you're more of a J.J. Abrams fan of the true Lucasfilm vision of Star Wars, then you're going to be an absolute joy to see what this movie did. But I think that regardless of what you think, this movie just doesn't add up, and it doesn't really do a good job at being the final movie to a franchise that has been running for 30 years. I think that after The Last Jedi, and especially after Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars has really never been the same. Nothing has ever really felt the same anymore. The love for the franchise has just kind of diminished into really nothing. And there has been some high points since Disney has acquired Star Wars, like we had The Mandalorian. We also had some other cool small stuff that they did. Clone Wars final season, once again, an absolute masterpiece. But besides that, I mean, Star Wars is at a very low point right now, to the point where I don't think they'll ever really recover. And this movie wasn't exactly the nail in the coffin, but The Rise of Skywalker was definitely the presentation of the casket for this franchise, because it's clearly about to be put to bed. We're at the wake right now, and maybe they'll come back to life. Who knows? But Rise of Skywalker, very frustrating, very cool at times, but overall isn't there. All right, still going strong here with our number 10 spot. I have Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Star Wars Phantom Menace is a really boring movie. This film is extremely boring. It's too long. Nothing really happens. The CGI is abysmal. I can go on forever. This movie just isn't good. I really want it to be good. I have moments with it. It's kind of cool. This opening to this prequel trilogy, I see what he was going for, but George Lucas really struggled to make this film really good. I think the concepts that George Lucas is presenting here and exploring here has a chance to be really good. And we saw with the Clone Wars show, they really just built on that. But here, it's just not enough. I think what they're doing with this first film is too much exposition, too much storytelling, not enough big moments, I guess you can say. The final act, of course, Duel of Fates is one of the best things in movie history. But outside of that final battle sequence, nothing is really good. There's some moments here of intrigue and just interest for me. But besides that, this whole first film, Phantom Menace, is not there. And as a Star Wars fan, of course I love it. Of course I think it's really cool and really fun. But objectively speaking, it's not there. It's not a good movie. All right, we're still going here with our top 10. At number 9, I have Solo, a Star Wars story. Solo, a Star Wars story is really not too good, but at the same time, it's not exactly terrible. This film definitely doesn't do a good job at what it's doing here. I mean, a Han Solo movie is kind of cool, showing off the Kessel Run. There's no way that this movie can't be fun, and this movie is a very fun ride, but overall, the plot and the story, kind of confusing, kind of dumb, not done too well whatsoever. And it makes me upset because I think that this movie is probably the most underrated Star Wars movie. I mean, this film came out right after The Last Jedi, and it came out the same summer as Deadpool 2 and also Avengers Infinity War. This movie had no chance to succeed whatsoever. This film was very much so doomed to fail. It showed that way in the box office. Critically, wasn't there at all. But I still have a fun time with this movie. I could throw it on like right now. I have a fun ride there. But I think that in terms of just overall quality, it could have been better, should have been better, kind of wasted potential. But what we did get at the end of the day is a fun time. I think Solo has all the incredible, awesome ingredients to be just delicious garbage that I can throw on at any time of the day. I mean, all these characters are really hitting, but at the end of the day, will I really be saying this is a top 5 Star Wars film? Never in a million years, but I still enjoy it. So Solo is in at our number 9 spot. For our number 8 spot, I have Attack of the Clones Episode 2, and this film I think I watched for the first time back in December, and this movie is really fun. Just like I said with Solo, this movie is incredible. I'll admit, that being said, not too great, but I think that George Lucas really started to have an idea of what he should be doing with this trilogy. And you can say all you want, objectively, this movie just isn't too good. The dialogue's bad, the story's bad, the CGI isn't good. Yeah, whatever, but just turn your brain off and have some fun for once, because episode 2 is a really great time. Attack of the Clones is pretty much just a live-action episode of Clone Wars, which is really always going to be a fun time. I'll admit there is a lot that you can say just isn't good about this trilogy and this entire movie as a whole. Just singling it out here, Attack of the Clones has a lot wrong with it. But what it does good with the story of Padme and Anakin, and also Obi-Wan Kenobi being an absolute boss the entire runtime, and also Jango Fett as well, and the origin of Boba Fett, it's fun. It's not great Star Wars, but it's a very fun and entertaining Star Wars. As I was rewatching all these movies last December, this one was definitely the most that I was surprised by, and one that I will always love forever. Okay, so at number 8, I have Star Wars Attack of the Clones. At number 7, I have Star Wars The Last Jedi. This movie has definitely become by far the most divisive Star Wars movie to date, and one that I don't exactly love, but don't exactly hate either. I understand both sides of the argument here, whether you love it or you hate it. If you love it, I understand why. Seeing Rian Johnson just completely kill off everything previously adapted in Star Wars and just going on a new path into a brand new universe is interesting. It's interesting. It adds more intrigue and more layers to it. I think that Star Wars up until this point is very kind of one-sided. You know, we have Revenge of the Sith and also Empire Strikes Back doing things differently here. But it wasn't until Last Jedi where they just completely decided to just burn everything before it and make something new. And on one hand, tarnishing the legacy of completely everything, even just destroying Luke Skywalker and also everything before it, is interesting. And it also is really cool to kind of do that, because having that risk and taking that risk deserves a lot of respect. And then also at the same time, it is like a lot of character assassination with this movie. Mainly the character of Luke Skywalker got a lot done wrong with him. And once again, it's really confusing because I see both sides of the argument. On one hand, Luke Skywalker would never do this. And then on the other hand, I think that Luke definitely would, after maybe like 40 years, decide to just quit on the entire Jedi. This is a film that you can really debate about for a very long time, which is what makes it really interesting and makes it really cool, and also really makes it not that great because it's just really an anti-Star Wars film, which for a Star Wars film is not that good of a decision, but one that I think deserves a lot of respect. So The Last Jedi is our number 7 spot, but for number 6, I have Star Wars Return of the Jedi episode. What is this? I don't even know. But Return of the Jedi is number 6 here, and Return of the Jedi is one that I'm very conflicted with and always have been very frustrated with, just because those first 2 Star Wars movies, A New Hope and also Empire Strikes Back, 2 of the greatest films in cinema history, and this one being the finale to everything, almost making it a perfect trilogy, it falls short. And that being said, even though I think that this is one of the worst finales to a trilogy in cinema history, I don't even think that Return of the Jedi is exactly a bad movie. What made Return of the Jedi not be a good film in terms of Star Wars is the fact that it's a sequel to Empire Strikes Back. And Empire Strikes Back being one of the greatest movies ever made, one of the best sequels in cinema history, the fact that this is the sequel and the finale to this trilogy is just what makes it that much worse. And there's a lot of instances in trilogies where when a movie is following up to a great sequel, like you have The Dark Knight Rises, you have a lot of other movies like Avengers Endgame, being sequels to incredible movies just makes them doomed to fail. It's like, yeah, on one hand, The Dark Knight Rises is a pretty solid movie, and also Avengers Endgame isn't even that bad, and Return of the Jedi also isn't even that bad of a movie, but the way they're handling this movie being a follow-up to just such incredible films is what makes them disappointing. I think even just from a writer's standpoint and also just the fan standpoint, if you're a writer having to write a sequel to Empire Strikes Back, you're going to be trying so hard that it just feels too forced and it doesn't feel that good whatsoever. And no matter what you do, the movie's still going to be bad. And even if you're a fan, in the eyes of a fan, being a sequel to Empire Strikes Back or the sequel to The Dark Knight or the sequel to Avengers Infinity War, you're going to be thinking about just how good those movies were and the fact that this movie has to live up to that. So it really doesn't matter what way you decide to slice this movie, it's just not there. It's just not going to be able to live up to what came before it, which is what makes it that much more of a disappointment. I hope that one day I'll be able to truly appreciate this movie and Return of the Jedi for just doing such a good job at capping off this trilogy, but for now, I don't like it. Alright, so Return of the Jedi is our number 6 spot, and going into our top 5 discussion, I have at number 5, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And I remember when I first watched this movie, I was in the hospital, and it was playing on like TBS for the first time, and I was just kind of watching it, and I was kind of thinking to myself, hold up, this movie actually is really good and it's really slapping. And last December, I just finally sat down and fully watched this movie from start to finish. I always knew what happened in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, but I don't think I ever really sat down and watched it. And when I watched episode 3, I just truly had to just gaze upon the glory that George Lucas presented us. And I'll admit, objectively, once again, the CGI may not be that good and the dialogue may not be that good. The CGI isn't there, but the movie as a whole, just forget about all of that. This film is truly incredible. This movie is really worth being the finale to a Star Wars film, and by far is the greatest finale in Star Wars and one of the greatest finales in cinema history. I always see this movie getting so much hate, and I never really understand why. Revenge of the Sith has all the ingredients to being an incredible Star Wars film. It has the stakes, it has the emotion, it has the characters being incredible, and the action sequences being some of the best we've seen in the franchise ever. And I think that all of those things I said before are really good, but the thing that really makes this movie just that much incredible is that this is definitely the most important Star Wars movie ever made. I mean, this movie shows exactly why this franchise even exists and why we even get to the start of A New Hope, and it really just delivers and lives up to everything that first trilogy set before it. That's really enough said about this movie. I mean, like I say before in a lot of previous episodes, movies speak for themselves a lot of the time, and this movie has all the emotion that I really want out of a Star Wars film, and always will just be that film for me. Alright, so Revenge of the Sith is a number 5 spot, but for number 4, I have the one, the only Star Wars Force Awakens. And I know you're probably really surprised by that pick because Star Wars Force Awakens gets a lot of hate a lot of the time for some reason, but Star Wars Force Awakens, if you were a fan back in 2015, 2014, when this movie first came out, this was like peak of the Star Wars fandom. This was like one of the highest points of Star Wars fandom, highest points of Star Wars cinema. This was just absolutely incredible. I mean, at this point, you had the Lego Star Wars games coming out. You had Star Wars Battlefront, which was just an incredible game. I played a lot growing up. And also the movie itself was really cool. And it left us off with a lot of questions, a really cool cliff ending, and really just made the bar set for what this trilogy could be. And I understand all of the hate around this movie. Yes, this is in one of the worst trilogies ever made. And yes, is The Force Awakens just a remaster of A New Hope? Absolutely. But why is A New Hope remastered a bad idea? I really don't know how they managed to mess up all of this movie. I mean, this trilogy had such immense potential with this first film and really just set the bar for what could have been. You can really say all you want about Rey and her being a Mary Sue and all of those just crazy anti-feminists online who love to trash on all these female characters. But if they just do a good follow-up to The Force Awakens, then all those criticisms go out the window. And I say that because when you look at characters like Ahsoka Tano or all those other awesome female Star Wars characters and just characters in film in general that are just female leaders, it isn't said at all about them being a Mary Sue or any kind of anti-feminist comments about that. But with this film and this franchise, what they did with all these female characters and mainly Rey, it's done pretty badly. But what this first movie did, it was just absolutely brilliant, a genius stepping stone for what this trilogy could be, and an absolutely high point in the Star Wars franchise. So in at our number 4 spot is Star Wars The Force Awakens. But for number 3, I have a film that I watched a really long time ago, and I didn't really like it the first time I watched it. And then I rewatched it again back in December, and this movie is just really good. Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, is one of the greatest Star Wars films that we'll ever get in our lifetime. And there's a lot of really good elements about Rogue One that makes it really good. But the biggest and strongest element of Rogue One is the fact that this movie is directed by Gareth Edwards and also shot by DP Greg Fraser, one of the greatest cinematographers working today. Every single frame in this movie belongs in the Sistine Chapel. It's just absolutely beautiful. The CGI is incredible. The music is really good as well. And Greg Fraser really just did an incredible job with this universe, filming it in a way that felt so real and also felt so grand. A perfect balancing act of the two is something that I'll always appreciate. And as for the story and the characters, this movie has a lot of story and character and risk and also stakes in this film. I mean, everyone in this movie can die and everyone actually does die in this movie, which makes it that much better. I feel like in a lot of movies nowadays and shows in general, whatever, I feel like writers and also producers, studio heads, someone is just so afraid to kill off characters and just add stakes to a story. And it's not like if a character dies, a movie just immediately becomes an absolute banger. But the fact that in this film, they really go the next step of killing off a character and not really caring about the consequences or anything of the backlash of the fandom, it really does make it that much better because of them taking that risk in this movie. And I think that what makes it even more interesting is that they got introduced in this Star Wars universe, and in the span of like an hour and a half, I already care about the outcome of this mission. I care about all these characters, what they love, what they hate, and just really just the way this movie is about to go about killing off all these characters makes it have a lot of weight and emotion to it. And also adding a little bit of red and a little bit of death and blood inside of the Star Wars universe is always going to be welcomed by me. A lot of this universe is just too much sunshine and rainbows. A lot of just low-risk films and TV shows have been coming out, and this movie, Rogue One, and also we have Revenge of the Sith, and so on. All these films that take that next step in this universe is what I just absolutely love about it. All right, so Star Wars Rogue One is our number 3, and for number 2 and number 1, I don't need to say a lot about because you already know what they are. You already know that they're that good. For number 2, I have Star Wars A New Hope, or if you're really old, just Star Wars, or Star Wars the movie, whatever. Star Wars A New Hope is really good. That's all I need to say about it. But I'll say a little bit more here. Star Wars A New Hope is just really simple and it's really cliche. It takes a lot of inspiration from older westerns and samurai movies. But what it's doing is really cliche because what this film did influenced hundreds upon thousands of movies that we got after it. It's very clear and very apparent that Hollywood just absolutely loves the Star Wars universe and the Star Wars franchise, and the movie we have to blame for all of that is really A New Hope, and also number 1, which you know it already is, but I think that A New Hope is just really good. It does a really good job of not doing a whole lot, telling a very simple story, and really just having a lot of potential shown to be built upon. I dived into all these films really later in my life, you could say, and I really do still have a really deep love and passion for this whole entire franchise, and it all really started because of A New Hope. We've been in love with this franchise for over 30 years, and all of the blame can go to Star Wars A New Hope from 1977. Before we go on to number 1, though, a very quick critique towards Star Wars 1977, and also I think Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, is the fact that George Lucas has just really just butchered these movies. I hate the fact that he went over all these films in the opening trilogy and kind of just gave all these films that nasty, dirty early 2000s CGI we saw in the prequel trilogy. It really has no place in any of these movies here, and I really just pray that one day we'll get just the original cut of the opening Star Wars trilogy, one without all the extra stupid CGI scenes, Hayden Christensen popping up as a Force ghost for some reason. I don't want any of that. I just want the original cut of this movie one day. I'm pretty sure that the only way you can watch the original cut of Star Wars 1977 and any of the opening trilogy Star Wars films is by streaming it somewhere illegally, maybe Soap Today. I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm saying that I'm pretty sure the only way you can do that is by illegally streaming it. Now, I'm not saying you should illegally stream the original true cut of this movie. What's wrong with you? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Let's go on to number one. And as for our number one, you already know what it is. This random movie, it's a sequel to one of the greatest films ever made. Not sure if you heard about it, but Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, 1980. You know about this movie already. I don't need to say anything at all whatsoever. But this film, yeah, it's good. This is the true Star Wars movie. Definitely the greatest Star Wars film ever and one of the best films ever made. There's a reason why whenever a really good sequel comes out, you always hear, this is the Empire Strikes Back of the Dune franchise. This is the Empire Strikes Back of the Captain America movies. It's because Empire Strikes Back is really one of the greatest trilogies ever made, and it always will be. I think the biggest highlight of this movie being as good as it is because of just how much conflict and pain it puts our heroes through to make it a great film. I mean, like in the first movie, it was a, relatively low stakes movie. I mean, yeah, you did have the Death Star in there, but this film is more than a Death Star movie like we've seen in a lot of Star Wars films, and it does a lot with it that makes it really good. If there was ever a blueprint for how to make a perfect sequel, this is definitely it. There's already like 1,000 different kind of video essays on why Empire Strikes Back is perfect, and definitely people talking about Empire Strikes Back for hours on end. So I'm not going to do that here. Maybe I'll link down some of my favorite Star Wars video essays down below, but really, that's all I have to say. Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, it's incredible. It's just something that every single cinephile and film bro fanboy fans over, and it's for very valid reason. So that's my entire ranking of all the Star Wars movies from worst to best, all 12 of them in their glorious honor. Before we get out of here, I'll give one last final push through my entire ranking. At number 12, I have Star Wars The Clone Wars movie, not that good. Number 11, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. Number 10 is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Number 9 is Solo, A Star Wars Story. Number 8 is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Number 7, I have Star Wars The Last Jedi. Number 6, I have Star Wars Return of the Jedi. Number 5 is Revenge of the Sith. Number 4, Force Awakens. Number 3, Rogue One. Number 2, A New Hope. And number 1, in all of its glorious honor, is Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, the masterpiece itself. Happy Star Wars Day to all of you beautiful listeners out there. Let me know what you're watching tonight. I really want to know. I may not even watch a movie tonight for Star Wars Day. I may just, watch something else, something cooler. Star Wars is kind of overrated. No, not kind of overrated. Probably the most overrated franchise in cinema history. Lord of the Rings, definitely better. Over the Hedge and kind of Diary of a Wimpy Kid trilogy, a lot better as well. So, that being said, whatever. I'm not going to try to start any more debates here. Until then, follow us everywhere, do all those fun things down below, and stay up to date on everything Court of Cinema. Keep on those notifications, share the show, rate the show, whatever. Stay tuned for our X-Men series and anything else fun we have coming in these next few weeks here. Until then, I'll stop on my yapping, but may the 4th be with you. May the Force be with you. Watch more movies like every single day. Stay swagged out, stay cool, and I'm your host Logan, and I'll see you guys in the movies.